So everything changed, you know, families, the land. It was the fastest first
Okay.
arrival at first.
Thank you.
It was incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
So fast, she didn't even get temperature.
How are you? How are you doing? Good to see you.
Sorry, made it by the skin of my teeth.
No, you're good.
Exciting,
You're
yeah.
good.
I issued with an agreement that's supposed to be on the commission this week.
Oh.
And then I looked at the clock and
I
was like,
need
shit, it's 4:30. I need to get
Said,
something.
do that. He said, yep, she's going for her first car ride. Margot.
I don't know if we're gonna have
Interesting.
here.
Phoebe.
They don't keep them in the hospital like
Okay.
when my oldest brother was born in 1935 at St.
I think any one of these seats is fine.
Mom was in the
I'll come and sit
hospital.
across from you, so if somebody else comes,
Yeah.
they can
Yeah.
They
pay
paid
more
with
in the
a
door there.
Sounds good.
They got change.
They got some spare ribs back.
Sad news about Joanne Butler.
Oh, I couldn't believe it.
You know, first time for a meeting in person in a long time, so we want to give everybody a couple minutes. But I wanted to, and I'm sure that you've all kept up on ACHD and our new branding.
Oh my gosh, look at this.
There's a pin and a hat
Oh my.
for the new ACHD logo and our tagline of connecting you to more.
You know, you can't bribe us.
I know, I wish I could. But those are for you. Thank you for
Boy,
being in
even
person.
stickers.
Stickers.
Some
is the best part.
stickers you can give away, or
An ACHD hat to go with my collection.
there you
Oh, this has
go.
got the new logo.
The new
Oh,
logo
yeah.
on it.
God,
Mhm.
Fancy.
It's a good one.
cool. Right.
And so on Zoom, we're utilizing the microphones that are in the ceiling. So those green lights are the microphones. They work really well, but just making sure that you speak
up.
to people across the room. So, and everything should be great.
You're making us, you're notifying us that we're being recorded.
Yes, we're
Wow.
not.
I should have been more careful, right?
You're good. So Mr. Wonders is unable. Mr. Steed said he was unavailable. So we're missing Eric and George. So we are shy of a quorum, but we can still have the meeting and it will be recorded.
Okay.
But we are shy of a quorum as of right now. One person.
Does that mean then that we,
You could postpone the action item,
okay,
and go into it. If you want to give it just a couple more minutes, just to see with the, you know, rain is so,
oh, what rain?
now wind.
Really disappointing.
I
I was
know.
waiting for something really cool.
Well, that's right.
Yeah,
I took a bunch of stuff in, whirly gigs, took the flag in. I have a flag that I put out 24/7. Took that in, but don't get me wrong, I'm glad that we did.
Well, I don't want any disaster for sure, but a really healthy rain would have been super for a lot of reasons. Even to help Cascade, you know, they're getting bookended last year to this year.
Right, exactly. We just, if you've been watching it, while I was there, just blown over to the east. They are getting a little bit more rain east of us.
Mm-hmm. Sun Valley got a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Stacy, do you think anybody else may come? Or you have not heard?
I did not hear from
Okay.
them, so I do not know.
Well, the fact that we don't have a quorum, we will just proceed. But let's introduce first, because my memory isn't always that good. I have Mike Wardle, I'm chair. They keep electing me every year, and I enjoy the money and the fame. So I'm with Brighton Corporation. We'll go this way and on around.
Okay, I'm Peter Oliver. I'm with TOK Commercial Real Estate.
Eric, Mr. Bodwin is on Zoom, so he is now, we are now a quorum.
Oh, we are now a quorum, okay. So,
John Turnipseed. I'm on the City of Star Transportation Committee.
Do you want to pronounce your last name in Italian though for us?
Se me derapa.
Okay, thank you.
Nice. That's impressive.
I'm Megan Anderson. I'm the Impact Fee Administrator here at ACHD. And you guys may remember my awesome presentation I gave last time we had a meeting. I'm sure it was enthralling.
Do we want to go onto the screen or?
Well, sure, go up the
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
Mr. Staff on the top left of the screen.
Mark, that's
Mark.
you.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Heisinger. I work for Kittleson Associates, so we're the transportation consultant, helping ACHD to update the CIP and TIP program this year. So working with Sonia. I'm usually in the Boise office, so hoping to meet you all in person at future meetings, but visiting some family this week out of state, so hence why I'm attending virtually today. But yeah, excited to kick off this project with everyone.
Name again?
Mark Heisinger.
Heisinger?
Yeah.
H-I-G-H?
H-I-E-S-I-N-G-E-R.
Okay. Stacy?
Glad my eyes are good enough that I can read that.
He gave you the thumbs up, so you did all right.
I'd have to get right up to that.
Get binoculars.
And then,
Mr. Bodden.
Hi, yeah, my name is Eric Wadden. I'm new to the CICAC, and sorry I'm not there today, but I've had a business trip and I'm in Texas today. So calling in, and also I don't have a webcam since I'm traveling either, so apologies for that as well.
representing who?
Ada County.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, I'm Sonia DeLyden. I'm also with Kittleson and Associates. I'll be the consultant project manager for this CIP and traffic impact fee update. So it's good to be with you all today.
I'm Kent Brown. In my past life, I've retired twice. I was an Army engineer officer for 26 years. And then I was the manager of engineering here at the Ada County Highway District for 17 years. And now I'm the representative from Garden City.
Okay, very good. And,
I'm Ken Cooney, I'm with IT at ACHD.
okay, and of course, Stacy.
Stacy. We have Christy and Tom in the audience.
It's snuck in the back. They're both with ACHD.
Whoa, yes.
Well, hello.
Right. I recognize at least one of the two. Christy,
We may have had stuff over the years that we worked
Possible.
together on.
but I,
I'm Tom Laws, the planning manager here at ACHD, and I'll be
Okay.
helping with the CIP as well.
well, I need to spend more time here, obviously, which actually is really quite good that I don't spend a lot more time here. But, okay, the first action item is approval of the minutes of February 27th, and I have one change. I noticed in the second item, the election of chair and vice chair, Mr. Brown, put with an R. It says Mr. Bound, but we'll put an R with that, and with that, unless there's any other changes or objections, we'll ask for unanimous consent. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It looks like we are unanimously consented. So the second item on the agenda then is the 2025 CIP update kickoff, and who gets to do that?
Yeah, so I'll get us started here. Edinson is not in the office today, so that's why he brought Christy and Tom to represent him. So if we have any questions, we can kick it over their way as well. So after we met in February, we did put out a request for qualifications, and Kittleson responded, and we reviewed their SOQ, their scope of their, sorry, what did,
Proposal.
there we go. I'm like, what am I looking for on my acronyms here? So we reviewed their proposal, we clarified some things on the timeline, and just made sure we carved out everything that we needed from that to be able to really dig into the CIP this time. And the last time the commission had kind of expressed that there were some things they had questions on and they wanted to see where we could go with the CIP in the future. So that is the hope with this update, that will just really give it a good look over, think of some new ideas, and go down whatever roads that takes us hopefully to a really great document that will meet our needs for the next 4 to 5 years, and looking at a 20-year horizon with our upcoming projects. So Sonia's here today for a visioning session to see what ideas you all have, what feedback you have from the agencies that you represent, and they will use that information and incorporate it into their work here. So I'll turn it over to you, Sonia, and then Mark is on the phone as well, so she may direct some questions or comments his way too. And he's also with Kittleson, as he mentioned earlier.
Great. Are we also sharing the presentation with the Zoom participants?
I keep forgetting that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just want to make sure everybody's seeing the same thing. All right, wonderful. Well, we're really happy to be here today to hear from the CICAC. I will start with just really talking about the purpose and goals of this CIP and traffic impact fee update. As Megan alluded to, this is not just a typical CIP and traffic impact fee update this go round, and I think that's one of the primary reasons that ACHD reached out to get some consultant support with this update. But the initial part of the scope of work for this project is to really review national best practices, what other similar organizations to ACHD are doing as it relates to their capital improvement planning, as well as their traffic impact fees. There's a strong desire from the commission to really look at those national best practices and identify any that either ACHD staff, you as an advisory committee, the public, or partnering agencies or the commission themselves might want to incorporate into either this CIP update or maybe future ones. So that will really be the first, a first key step in our work, is looking at those national best practices and then identifying maybe ones that could be incorporated now into the 2025 CIP, and ones that maybe are of interest but warrant future consideration, future analysis, and maybe might be incorporated in the future depending on how that analysis plays out. After we go through that best practices review, we then do need to update ACHD's current CIP and traffic impact fee for 2025 as part of the state Idaho Impact Fee Act. That plan and the traffic impact fee program do need to be updated at a minimum of every 5 years, and so that is that will be another outcome as well. Depending on how the best practices reviews go and the input we receive from these advisory committees and the commission, those documents may look slightly different than how they do today, depending on what best practices we incorporate.
On your question before you
Yeah.
go on, has the commission provided any input at all at this point, or is this just the kickoff for the entire process?
Yeah, great question. So staff have presented some ideas to commission, or have workshopped some ideas to commission, basically letting them know this update is coming, and hearing from them some ideas they have. But we have not gone to commission as part of the formal process yet. That was sort of before the RFP was released, as part of some other ongoing documents. So what we have done as a project team with Edinson, Megan, and Kittleson is we have done a visioning session with ACHD staff. So with their development services staff, their planning staff, and also with their traffic engineers. And so we did a visioning session with them. Our next step is to do this visioning session with this advisory committee. And then from there, what we're going to be doing in September is taking what we've heard from both of those, reporting back to the commission at that time, and then also hearing from the commission their direction that they'd like to go, based on what these groups have said.
Then the other question, then with the visioning, or at least the input from staff, is that going to be part of our presentation here? Or I guess I would like to know kind of what ideas have been at least put out there so that we could either build on it or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. So you all did receive an email last week that had some of those ideas in it, but we will also go through them today for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't remember that email,
I
honestly.
think Edinson had sent the email.
That was just that bullet point list?
Yes, it was a bullet point list
Yeah.
of some ideas that have been talked
Sorry.
about. Oh, good, yes.
Okay.
You have it, wonderful.
Too many pieces of paper.
That's okay. The other thing I will mention before we move on from purpose and goals is that Kittleson is also partnering with Jeff Wordle as a legal expert, because we know there may be a lot of great ideas that other agencies and other states may be doing, but we know anything that we incorporate into the CIP and TIF do need to be cohesive with the current Idaho Impact Fee Act. So they need to abide by legally what that act entails. And, you know, as we all know with law, there's interpretations of it as well. And so we have his expertise, which we're very thankful for, to help us with that component. So you will likely be hearing from him as well, and he will be, as we go into this best practices review, he will be a very important partner for us too.
Do I need to disclose the fact that he's my son?
I don't foresee that being a
Okay.
conflict of interest, but yes, that's great to know, yeah. All right, yeah. Megan, anything else you wanted to add in terms of purpose and goals?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it great.
All right, awesome. So we wanted to present to you all just how the project overall schedule would go. So we're here in August of 2023, where we are kicking off this best practices review. We anticipate that going through October of this year. And then once that portion is completed and we have direction from both you and the ACHD Commission on how we're going to incorporate any of those best practices into this update, we'll then dive in November to the actual CIP update. And that will start with an analysis and an identification of projects over the 20-year horizon. From there, we will go into cost estimates, and that results into the traffic impact fee calculations. And then we'll be wrapping that up into a CIP document, and then also an updated traffic impact fee policy for ACHD to adopt. Ideally by September of next year, but depending on how the best practices research goes and what direction the commission asks us to go in terms of best practices we are going to incorporate in this update, that there may be some flex to that. From a legal standpoint, ACHD does have until June of 2025 to update this process and still be compliant with the Impact Fee Act, but we don't foresee it taking anywhere near that long, and our goal is to wrap it up by September or October of 2024.
Sonia, before again.
Yes.
At what point is it the the April through July period that the public would start to see this for
Yes.
comment?
Yep, it would be in likely June of 2024. Yeah, that's the way our schedule is currently, where our schedule currently has that. Yeah, And so a really important part, as we've discussed, of this best practices review is to have these visioning sessions. There are a lot of different components that go into both the CIP and the traffic impact fee calculations. And you know, if you can think of it, there's a lot of knobs that you can turn one way or the other, or different performance measures to add. And so that is why these visioning sessions are really important, so we can hear from these advisory committees what you're most, what you think works really well with the CIP and traffic impact fees right now, areas where you think they're not maybe not working as well as you would like, so we can refine the areas that we're going to investigate. So I will move on to the next slide, and with this I'll pass it over to Mark to walk us through these next couple topics.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. So I think how we wanted to start this off is really just get an idea from this group on how familiar you are just with the current ACHD CIP and impact fee methodology. So since this is our first time interfacing with you, I think that's just an important step for us just to get an idea of how much of this is new to you, how much into the, I'm sure you're all kind of familiar with the overall process and program, but we're just trying to get a little better idea of kind of your knowledge. So we have a couple snippets of documents here. So capital improvement plan, project lists, as well as the impact fee schedule. So these are all documents that are part of the CIP and impact fee program, and things that we'll be updating as part of this project. So I think initially we wanted to just go around the room and get an idea from everyone of how familiar you are with the whole methodology. And you don't need to go too in depth. I think we're just trying to hear from a high level kind of how familiar you are. So maybe Sonia, if you want to kind of go around the room and kind of facilitate that, we can start with the people in the auditorium area.
Yeah, we can start to my right, maybe.
Okay, this is Kent Brown. For those that are out in the Zoom world, September of 1991, I was hired as the manager of engineering here at the Highway District. At that time, the Highway District was putting together the impact fee program, and that was under my area of supervision. And after a little bit of difficulty, I hired a really good person, in my opinion, named Larry Sale. And Larry, under my supervision, put together the impact fee program with some assistance from the attorney. And as part of that process, the first CIP put together as a result of the impact fee program that involved that, and the 5-year work program that still exists for capital improvement, we put that together. And that was, so I'm very familiar with it from that time and until 2008. Shortly, it was not too far after that, the mayor asked me to get on this committee. And so I'm familiar with it with regard to how much we've been involved. I would say I'm not as familiar with the later impact, the later policies than I was of the original ones.
Great.
So you're saying that we can blame you or praise you, whichever.
If it's all good, it must have been the reason that we put it together. If any of it's bad, it wouldn't be fair, but I would blame it on Larry Sale, right? I know, because Mike knows him very well. So anyway, but that really wouldn't be fair. Okay?
And I review the documents for work purposes virtually every time they get broadcast out just to see, particularly in the areas that we are developing. But so I'm quite familiar with the current documents and the integrated 5-year plan. So that, yeah, so I'm fairly up to speed on most of what's included in the documents.
Yeah, I'd say I'm reasonably aware and understand the methodology of how much it costs from an impact fee standpoint for doing a project. The mystery of what goes on behind the curtain. I know you have your projects and then there's some kind of formulation that goes on, right? And that results in these impact fees that you pay to build buildings and such. So that's the latter is what I'm most familiar with, just as how it impacts projects. And then there's always discussions about how much traffic are we really generating and how high the fees should be and those sort of things. So.
Great.
This is John Turnip Seed. Familiar with the process at a very high level, but I've never worked through the entire thing at this level. So looking forward to getting involved and understanding some of the sausage making that goes on.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
We want to make sure we ask Mr. Bowden.
Yes, Mr. Bowden.
Yeah, so being the rookie, I am not familiar. So looking forward to listening to what everybody has to say here.
We will expect you to review and report next meeting, though. We'll ask you questions.
Yeah, you bet.
Hidden items in the documents.
10 or 20 slides on the PowerPoint?
I have just kind of one peripheral question because we quite often work with communities that they establish their priority lists and provide those to ACHD, and I'm assuming, because I see changes that occur from iteration to iteration as a result, that's always incorporated, is it? Or those priority lists from their perspective, at least within the framework of what resources are available?
This is a great
Is that
question
Christy?
to send to the back of the room.
Yes, so,
Christy, would you come
just come sit up front so I can talk
come
really
forward
loud.
so that we can?
I can, okay, yeah, sorry. I'll come up
Just
so
so-
everybody online can hear me.
And we have 2 chairs at the table here for you guys.
There's that too. So the 5-year work plan is developed through our office as well, and every single year we go out to our partner agencies for their prioritization lists. So their prioritization lists really get incorporated more into the development of the integrated 5-year work plan, more so than the CIP. So the CIP is a little bit more data-driven and future needs and growth rates and travel demand and all that, whereas the 5-year it incorporates more of the prioritization of our partners, yes.
I would add though that historically we have seen projects fall off from the CIP list pending compass modeling adjustments, comprehensive plan changes with densities and development types and things like that too. So it isn't uncommon to see a project located in this one year and then no longer be there the next.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Well, I'll pass it back to Mark because he's got this flow chart, which may be a reminder to some of you. Maybe some of you are familiar with one half of the chart, but not the other one. So he's going to walk through it. So this is a high-level overview of historically, I guess, with the most recent CIP, how it gets put together and how it ties to the traffic impact fees.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia, and thanks everyone for sharing. It sounds like we have a pretty good range of folks who are very familiar with this process versus people who aren't as familiar and more just from a high level. So I'll try to provide a good amount of detail just as I walk through this, and then afterwards, if you have any questions or if we want to dig into the weeds, we definitely have that opportunity. So from a high level, this flow chart is kind of what we put together as our way of showing the concept for how the CIP and impact fee schedule gets put together. So I'll start on kind of the left side, so starting at existing and future roadway intersection deficiencies. That's kind of one side of the equation. And essentially what that is us going in from really a traffic analysis, like a vehicle capacity perspective, and saying, which roadways and intersections are deficient based on ACHD standards, which are really based on kind of volume to capacity ratios, level of service, some traffic engineering terms right there. And that's really what drives that. And we look at existing roadway and intersection deficiencies, and one of the big purposes of that is that kind of determines impact fee eligibility. And then we also look at future deficiencies. So that's really projecting out to a 20-year horizon. So for this round, we'll be doing 2045. And that's really utilizing what Compass has and the projections that they put together with help from member agencies like ACHD. So essentially, they'll provide us with future traffic volumes on all roadways within the study area, and we'll look at that and we'll kind of calibrate it based on existing traffic volume data. But that's really what drives kind of these projects that we identify, and that's what's rolled into the project list and actual CIP document. And then from there, once we've identified those projects, we develop cost estimates for each project, and that's updated every CIP as well. And so that's really what the CIP document is. It's listing out these projects, kind of documenting how they were identified, and then assigning costs to each project. And then from there, we're really able to identify the traffic impact fee eligible costs. And when you look into the actual CIP document, it really just comes out to be a big line item. I think the last CIP, it was like 900 million, something like that. And so in terms of how the CIP affects the impact fees, that's really kind of the big thing that we're going to pull from that project list and that CIP document. So that's one side of the equation. And then on the other side, you see kind of that VMT acronym. So that means vehicle miles traveled. And essentially, that's just an output from Compass's region-wide travel demand model, and essentially says all the vehicle miles traveled on a daily or an annual basis for existing conditions as well as future. So we'll compare that 2025 VMT to the future VMT, and we'll kind of subtract. We'll take the difference of those two, and that'll give us the change in VMT from growth. And so then we take our TIF eligible costs on one side, that change in VMT from growth on the other, and that gives us what we call the average VMT cost. And that's essentially the cost per vehicle miles traveled associated with all of these traffic impact fee eligible costs. So really what we're trying to do here is say, what are all of these deficiencies caused by growth, and then kind of assign a dollar value. And VMT is just kind of how we do it and how ACHD has done it for a while. And then from there, once we have the average VMT cost, we assign various land use trip generation characteristics to really come up with the traffic impact fee schedule. And if you look at the actual traffic impact fee document, you'll see kind of a series of equations, and it essentially says, or what it's saying is that different land uses have different land use trip generation characteristics, and they apply that to VMT, and that's how it actually turns into the schedule and how you come up with a cost per single family home or square footage of different commercial uses. So that's our very high level kind of overview of this methodology. And as we kind of move forward in this visioning session today, we'll kind of help walk through how different changes, and Sonia referred to these kind of knobs that we can shift kind of in this methodology and in this framework. We'll kind of talk about how these different changes affect different parts of this process. So a lot of like the traffic analysis performance measures, for example, those will really affect kind of how these projects get identified. So kind of on the left hand of the screen, that's what'll be kind of, it'll affect that. When we talk about growth assumptions, that'll kind of affect the right side of the screen and really looking at the VMT. And then there's also a lot of different kind of things that go into the land use trip generation characteristics that we'll have the opportunity to look at changes for, and we'll kind of walk through what those changes might be and how that might affect the methodology. So I think maybe there we'll pause and just see if anyone has any questions. I think we're happy to kind of go into any more detail into any of these items.
Any questions about just how the current methodology works, or?
Keep going.
Okay, keep going. All right. So as we go forward into talking about what potentially we could be changing, we really want you to think about it from the standpoint of what areas have worked well with the CIP and TIF process, and maybe what areas have been challenging or have not worked as well. So the purpose of today's visioning session is really twofold. One, we just wanted to introduce the project team to you all again, so that we, and lay out how the process of the project, how it's gonna go. And then for the visioning, really identify the areas that the CICAC would like to focus on, your guidance and direction. What would you like us to really focus on for the best practices review? And I think when we talk about that, it's might be helpful to break it down into these broad categories. So as Mark was alluding to, there's different areas within that overall process that we can change, and they will affect certain parts of that process. So the first area that we can change is really talking about changes to the traffic analysis methodology. So that could be things like, what performance measures are we using? In the past, ACHD has used a peak hour volume to capacity ratio as really their key performance measure for that. And they've identified a 90% volume to capacity ratio as their threshold. So is that still the direction we want to go, or do we want to do something different? Another area that we could look at are changes to the performance measures. Is volume to capacity the best performance measure, or the only performance measure we want to use, or are we interested in looking at something else? As examples, other agencies have started to look at things like safety as a performance measure, travel reliability, not just capacity as a performance measure. We're not here to say those are right or wrong. It's really to get your input on, are there other things, other performance measures you would like to look at. And then sort of a final category we could investigate are changes to the actual traffic impact fee calculation and implementation. So I think a key element of that might be, what components of these projects are actually eligible for traffic impact fees. Right now, it's really roadway widening that is eligible for traffic impact fees. It's capacity, transportation capacity, and vehicle capacity. Do we want to investigate if more components of the project, maybe bike lanes and sidewalks, should those be eligible for traffic impact fees as well, or not? So maybe an item that might be helpful is to look at it this way. So if we refine the traffic analysis or the performance measures we're looking at, we're really affecting those first two boxes up there on that left-hand side of the process. So if we change our traffic analysis procedures or our performance measures, that will really influence both the existing and future roadway or intersection deficiencies we identify, and therefore that will change what CIP projects actually get put into the document. But so these are things like that we sent out in the bullet list. So changing the peak hour factor that we use, changing the saturation flow rate that we assume, or changing our performance measures. Do we want to just study the peak hour, or should we expand that to study a peak period? What is the VC rate, the volume to capacity threshold we should be looking at? Or are there other performance measures beyond just capacity? And I'm gonna go through this and we can come back. So this is not your only opportunity to respond. If we change things related to the traffic impact fee calculation or how the traffic impact fee is implemented, it's really looking at these components of the process that we would be changing. So which elements which components of projects are actually eligible to traffic impact fees, and how that plays down to the traffic impact fee schedule itself. So those could be, what are the trip generation rates we're using for our land uses? Are we using the standard trip generation rates for a house, for an office building? Should they still be the same as we've used in the past or not? What is a reasonable trip length for those calculations as well? Should we be using one service area for the whole county as we are doing today? Or should we revisit multiple service areas? There was a time in the past where ACHD's traffic impact fee used multiple service areas. And then, as I alluded to before, should we be changing the range of projects that are actually eligible for traffic impact fees? So with that, I mean, I don't know what's the easiest way to look at it. I could leave these slides up here. I could go back to, whoops, where am I wanting to go? Yeah, back here to just talking about the 3 large bins. But we'd really like to hear from you, either questions to help you formulate your ideas more, or specific opinions you have about which components of these you'd like us to investigate further for what are other agencies out there doing.
Well, and that's really kind of the first question I underlined in the memo or the email regarding topics of the most interest. It says national best practices. What are we seeing that might be then provoking us to open up this discussion? Are there items at the national level that are changing essentially what we need to do or just may desire to do?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that may start with transportation agencies nationally, and this probably will not be a big surprise, but they always have more deficiencies than they have money to address. And so they're looking for ways to either refine what the most important priorities are, or to expand the opportunities they have for funding. So I think at a high level, those are 2 elements that we're seeing. If you look at the first, so how do we refine really what our top priorities are? I think, many agencies still use capacity as their performance measure. It's an important performance measure. It's what the public experiences when they're out there driving. But there's other performance measures agencies are going to now. Maybe some agencies have come to the realization that we're never going to always build our way out of congestion. There's a finite number of lanes we can build. There's a finite resources we have. So instead of just focusing on capacity, maybe we need to focus on things like safety instead, or the reliability of our system. Maybe people aren't always going to be are not going to always be traveling with no congestion, but they're going to know I can get from point A to point B at about the same time, for about the same time each time I make that trip. It's not going to be one day my trip to work takes me 20 minutes, but then there's an accident another day, and so it takes me 100 minutes to get there or whatever. So they're looking at reliability. I guess the other component is funding. Agencies are looking for more ways that they can adapt their funding strategies to make more components of their projects traffic impact fee eligible. So when they go to actually implement an improvement, they have funding to complete the whole project, not just the vehicle lanes of the project. So I want to emphasize none of these are necessarily right or wrong. It's just different things that are happening out there. And I think your advice is really important to help us guide which of these do you want us to pursue most.
Okay, committee members, what would you like to?
Actually, I would volunteer to go first if it's all right.
Please.
I actually have 3 points that
Okay.
I've checked out with pertinent people. Everything that I'm going to say about this has to do with my role here is to represent Garden City, and that's where, if you interpret any criticism that comes from me, that's my perspective and what these items are. I would like for you to please put the chart back on the that's the one, not
This one?
on the impact fee methodology, but that's it, that's
Yep.
right.
Okay.
Cause all of these three, that I'm gonna mention are inherent in this particular issue, okay? So, let me start off. In Garden City, because of the way Garden City was developed, and consequently, a major problem for Garden City is almost no impact fee money that comes to the highway district is spent in Garden City. And here is the reason. There are no arterials other than 2 small sections in Garden City that belong to the highway district. They all belong to ITD, which doesn't get any of the impact fee. So we find ourselves in a situation, and anybody that goes through Garden City right now will see there's all kinds of development going on, especially really big time of development in the old part of Garden City. However, Glenwood, all right, Glenwood to Chinden, Glenwood from State to Chinden belongs to ITD. All of Chinden, which is in Garden City, belongs to ITD. State Street to Glenwood belongs to ITD. The only other arterials in all of Garden City is that short piece of Veterans from the river to Chinden. From the river north to State Street belongs to Boise. So that little piece, and State Street on the south side only, from Glenwood east to where the Pick Apart Wrecking Yard is, if you're familiar
Oh, yeah.
with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only piece. So those are the only 2 pieces of arterials. So when the impact fee program was put in place in 1991-92, collectors were eligible for impact fee. And so that did give a little bit of eligibility, because Adams Street in the old part of Garden City is a collector. And that's the only collector, though, that hasn't been developed by developers building it out. In other words, it already existed. And we did spend some impact fee money on fixing up Adams Street. But 2005, I'm not criticizing, I understand, I was here at the time and when it was done, but from 2005 on, we made a decision that collectors weren't eligible for impact fee. That had to do with just what you talked about, there's not enough resources to fix all the stuff. But as a result, it took out a collection, a little bit of space where there was collecting. So we're now at the situation where there are almost no projects, widening projects, existing in Garden City that would make it eligible to get any of the impact fees that are collected in Garden City, because there is a lot of development going on. So that's the first note.
And if you don't mind, I'll just add, because this may be helpful for some of the other members who are less familiar. The other important point you made is the jurisdictions of the roadway, because the ACHE's traffic impact fee only accounts for, when Mark was going through vehicle miles traveled is an important factor. it only accounts for vehicle miles traveled on ACHD arterials.
That's correct.
So that's a really
That's
important
correct.
piece of the calculation that
Absolutely.
currently is influencing
That's
what you're
correct.
saying. Yeah.
All right, the second issue has to do with what impact fees are eligible within projects that are eligible, what they're eligible to expend on. If you look at our submission, and you talked about the integrated 5-year work program, by the way, I was the person in charge of putting that together. Believe it or not, it was patterned after our Department of Defense does.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, and we didn't call
I
it the
know.
integrated
It's all
plan
come
at
full
that
circle
point.
with
But
Director
that's where it
Wong,
came
yeah.
from. Anyway, if you look at the submission of what ITD, or what Garden City turns in for that, you're gonna see the old part of Garden City, that's the part that's south of the river, and east of Glenwood. That's what I refer to as the old part of Garden City. When that was developed, there were literally no standards. So there were no sidewalks, didn't develop, there was no drainage system put together. And consequently, those parts, the biggest single problem we have wise is trying to get sidewalks and drainage systems put in that part. So when you look on this prioritization program that we submitted, this is the one in 2021, but we just updated it. It was just updated in 2023. In fact, we sent the same thing in with some notes on it. And when you look at this, almost all of the higher priority projects are pedestrian and bicycles and crossings for those. And they are these kind of projects, getting crossings, pedestrian crossings across Chinden. It's a major problem. So a bunch of ours, and we sort of thought we had, and that has further been impacted, the lack of ability to use impact fees. First of all, there's a lack of ability to get projects that are eligible for it, but even within that, of getting money that we can use for fixing up the sidewalks and stuff and crossings. So, and that's been further complicated by the Idaho legislature, and you can take this as being criticism of the Idaho legislature. At the last session, they passed an act that de-emphasizes how much money you can spend out of federal dollars and everything else for pedestrians and bicycles. And what they specifically said, that your money is to be concentrated on moving cars. So we're back. So that didn't help it at all. And I don't know if it's because of that, but we finally, as a part of the $5 million that they got for this area to help with those kind of things, the federal dollars, ACHD worked with Garden City, and we thought we were gonna get a crossing at Chinden and 43rd Street. It's one of the highest priorities on this whole list. We were really thinking, wow, we're gonna get some, because 2 crossings on Chinden have been like the highest priority projects for a very long time. So lo and behold, either as a result of that or something else, ITD just, within the last 2 months, has come back and said, no, they won't approve that. So.
Is that because of the legislature?
I don't know.
Okay.
The letters from ITD, and I'm not deeply involved, they highlight some concerns they have about the designs and other things, but.
Okay.
They say it's too close to Curtis is one of the things that we could do it. But from our perspective, if you walk where the problems are and how it's dividing, that's a major problem of getting pedestrians across. That piece of State Street that, well, whole bunches of State Street, the problem that we have there aren't enough places to get pedestrians and bicyclists across. But nevertheless, that's a problem.
Yep.
From Garden City's viewpoint, some of our highest priority projects that we put on here are ruled out, so they're not eligible. And I'm not saying that we were able to change it, but I'm representing Garden City. This is a problem for us. And the problem has been exacerbated lately since we've taken one more step to de-emphasize, for these purposes of this, pedestrians, bicycles, and those kind of projects. So when we look at it, the process, and what's in it for Garden City, if you will, that's a real problem. And that brings, I only got one more that I want.
Okay.
So we would like to see these things kind of considered in this
Yep.
some way, okay? I call it the problem of de-emphasizing the need for bike lanes and pedestrian projects, including pedestrian crossings of our major arterials. And the third issue, which we would like, which is right up here, has to do with the second bullet.
Okay.
And as I pointed out, I've been involved in this program since it started. I've been on both sides of this question, and I don't have an answer about which one is better. But Garden City would be in favor of definitely looking at that question again.
Okay.
At one time, a couple of years ago, when they looked at it, might have been 3 years ago, we actually were sort of lobbying for the multiple service areas when that discussion was, last time it came on. But the more I looked at it, the less confident I am that that definitely would benefit us in any way. So I guess what I'm saying is we're agnostic with regard to which one is better, but we would like to have that looked at as part of this and to sort of develop some data. But it's totally parochial. What we would, since I am representing Garden City, we would look at it as which one of those would in any way benefit Garden City, and maybe giving it a little bit of money that could come out of impact fees that would go there. Which one is better? That would be our perspective. That might not be the proper perspective for everybody, I understand that. So those were the three issues that I actually talked over with our leadership a little bit, and I was prepared to bring up.
That's great. So just to repeat back, make sure I have it. So the first was evaluating collectors and their whether or not collectors should be
if they
part
could
of the
be
CIP
put in some way. I understand how the arterials that belong to ITD can't, there's no way they could be put in.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Could we put those back in?
Yep, and then the eligibility of pedestrian, bike, and/or crossing projects.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the investigating best practices related to multiple service areas for the TIF versus
Exactly.
one. Okay,
Exactly.
great.
John, from STOR's perspective, what do you want to put on the table?
Pretty much.
They got the same issue.
I was gonna say,
They
pretty
have the
much
same
second
issue.
what he said.
You only have, I think you don't, no, you have, I think Star Road is an arterial.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So that Star, they have their other arterial is State Street. And so they have the same problem we do.
Yeah, and we're pushed up to Chinden now over to the city limits, so.
Exactly.
Same exact problem, so.
And they'll have the problem on Chinden.
Definitely, pretty much second everything he said. Also, the multiple service area is something that we would like to think about. I know it's complex. The challenge for us is, well, in districts, Star are split in half as far as we're in districts. And then we work with, Highway District 4 from Canyon County, and it's just a lot of confusion for the average person. One of the things that I hear criticisms for when I talk to folks is they can't understand how we always tout impact fees, pay for the new growth. But you look at the budget and of the millions of dollars collected over the last few years, I don't know what percentage, maybe 50–60% has been returned to Star. And I explain, you know, you have to put some money towards where the commuters go through Eagle and you know, all the other cities, but still there's a large amount of money that's being collected they feel is not being utilized in the community where it's being needed.
Okay.
Only other thing that is probably new is I would question, do we know when the last assumed trip links were measured? I mean, there was so much growth going on in Star and people are commuting, you know, way into Boise, so I don't know if the last time those were updated. Maybe that's something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, so the trip lengths right now are taken from the Compass model. That's where they're pulled from. So with one service area, the way the system currently is, it's a average for the entire county, but it's pulled from the model. I don't know if others have opinions on whether or not that's been sort of truth checked through surveys or other data collection. I mean, that is something that could be looked at.
One of the things that I've observed over the last, you know, year plus I've been involved with this volunteer committee in Star, a lot of the data from from Compass is lagging, you know, because development is just raging in not only Star, but, you know, CUNA, some of the other areas. So I don't know if there's any way of looking at pulling data forward, looking at the rapid growth. You know, some of the areas out there are just exploding, and right there on the border with Eagle, there's another 7,000 houses going in there, and you know, it's just crazy trying to figure this out. So trying to stay ahead of the areas that are just exploding in growth is something I don't know how you could look at, but if that's a best practice,
Yeah.
that would be helpful to us anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something we can see how other agencies and communities are dealing with that.
Yeah. So that's pretty much from my perspective.
Okay. Great.
Peter?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of items to add. The one that has been recurring, that's a relatively new phenomenon in downtown Boise, is all the residential that's going in, multifamily. So the common complaint you'll hear from developers is, you know, we're paying all these impact fees. People live here. Some of them don't even have cars, and where's the money going, right? And so it's, you know, really the last, I don't know, say 8 to 10 years, we've seen a lot of new high-density residential. Obviously, the city just passed and ratified their new zoning code, which really pushes that. And so that's another item of consideration on just how you address it, conveying the message, if you will, and it's going to continue to happen. You know, office, there's a lot of people that commute into downtown Boise. If you really want to get in the weeds, then you say, all right, how are we going to look at this now that there's a 3-day/4-day/whatever work week as it relates to trips too, because that's changing. That's probably way too complex, but the residential piece is something that we're hearing more and more of as we're having more and more high density projects go in.
Yeah.
And you know, where those fees go, and then kind of a subcomponent of that as well. If we're gonna pay those when we're probably not creating the traffic impact that another project would be, is there ways to have the funds be more localized around the project? So I'm on the commercial developers advisory committee here too. So I get to hear all the complaining from that side. So that would be the only one I'd add.
Okay. Great.
Obviously, I don't have quite the same perspective. I represent the development community in a general sense, but I think we've had this discussion a lot about the service areas. I look at a Garden City from your perspective, and it's almost like a ground zero where everything, and you're kind of caught between everybody else and Boise downtown, but I mean, Garden City in and of itself probably doesn't generate a lot of outward activity. So you're kind of the ones that get, you're the end of the funnel, as it were, from everything coming in Highway 44 down
Actually,
Glenwood.
it's not so much of a funnel. Might be a funnel, two-ended funnel. It's
Well,
a conduit. It's more like a conduit.
Better now.
Right?
At one point, I know that there was, this is long ago, but the service areas were looked at as more of a growth management tool. And I don't know exactly when that change occurred, but you know, when we put it all into one bucket, you know, it doesn't do anything in terms of growth management. It's just a capture of whatever. And I don't disagree. The question about you know, the trip length calc, I think that's a mystery, because how do you really generalize the entire county unless you have service areas? And then you can identify, you know, basically where they're using Compass's model. I used to be on the demographic committee for Compass, and you know, every project that ACHD requires a traffic impact study, you have to identify, you know, directions and volumes and so forth. Well, obviously, the system that we have currently in place here in terms of impact fees does not do that from my perspective. So I think we're caught in some regards a little bit by the legislative action. And you didn't want to get into a big deal on that, but there's not the great thinkers that we sometimes have had in the past at the State House, from my perspective.
Well, no, I agree. Remember, that was the one in which could be indicted for being critical.
Oh, no.
You quote me on that too.
So, anyway, again, my primary interest would be the question of, we need to really revisit the multiple service area question in order to, get some justice for some of these member agencies that may not be generating the types of generalized traffic. So I don't think I have anything more to add than what has been very, very well stated here.
Great. Is it Mr. Bowen on the?
Bowden.
Eric Bowden.
Yeah.
Bowden, yeah. Eric.
Bowden.
Wanted to make sure you had a chance to chime in too. Or even
Yeah,
just ask questions.
Yeah, I've got probably more questions than anything else, so I'm just gonna continue to observe and understand what you guys are saying. I understand the Star and the Garden Valley, Garden City issues. The only thing that struck me, and I think this is not necessarily an Ada County issue, but it's more along the lines of what the gentleman from Star and Garden City were talking about, is how you can maybe take a look at the future and see how to stop these things from happening in Garden City and now in Star, right? And how we fix that moving forward, so we don't put the different cities that maybe more and more Ada County gets incorporated and then does block people in to those areas. So we stay out of that issue in the first place. But I don't mean to be talking out of school from that perspective. Being new here, just kind of hit me as looking from a continuous improvement plan, right? How we can work on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just, Sonia, one more, I guess, a step back question. Does state law now preclude ACHD from considering pedestrian safety crossing issues? I mean, we can't even consider impact fee money for those, can we?
That is a question we will be exploring with Jeff Wardle. Yeah, I don't want to make a presumption, and I don't want to answer a definitive yes or no now. I think it's up to interpretation, yeah.
I guess my question is really, is it something that we can even really legitimately bring up other than complain about?
Right.
That's a good question.
And again, I think, you know, out of this best practice evaluation, we're gonna have ideas go in two buckets. One being, this is something we wanna incorporate now, and then another one being, this is something we're really interested in. We can't incorporate it now for whatever reason it might be, but ACHD wants to continue to pursue this, and you know, we need to do more investigation of how it could be incorporated in the future. So that may end up being one of those items, if legally right now, it is not possible to do.
That may then become kind of an action item for member agencies to begin a legislative process.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do we have on this particular topic then?
Yeah, so this has been wonderful feedback. I think this is really helpful. It echoes some of the information we heard from staff, but there's also some different perspectives here that I think are really helpful to help guide us as we do this research. So our next steps as a project team, we will be doing a similar visioning and also report back session with the ACHD Commission in early September. So sharing what we've heard from ACHD staff, what we've heard from this advisory committee, and getting their confirmation on the direction the best practices review should go. Then we will complete that review, look at similar agencies, what other methods, approaches have been tested and applied elsewhere that may show benefit here. And then what we'd like to do is we'd like to target October 23rd to come back with this advisory committee and present the results of that best practices review to get your input and guidance on where we should take it from there. So those are the near-term next steps that we would like to complete. So I don't know if Stacy needs a confirmation that October 23rd works for that next meeting, or that's at least what we'd like to target now.
I think that would be very helpful, because quite often things, we pass on information and we never get the feedback, so at least we'll have that opportunity.
And you know, that date can be flexible, you know, a week before, a week after, but that's that would be our ideal timeline, because after that, then we'll be going back to the commission as well.
Well, my October 23rd right now is a blank. Works for me. Yeah.
Works for me.
It is a Monday.
Yep.
It's a fourth Monday. That's about all I have.
Well,
But I can
that's fine.
certainly send it as a calendar invite right away, so it's on the calendar.
Please do so.
That's good.
Well, thank you for that. That's the last item on our agenda today. What else, any items from staff at this point that were, anything from the commission or committee members, excuse me? That goes back about 40 years for me.
You're fine.
Well, actually, 42 years. Okay, well, then, unless there's any objections, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the really helpful feedback. This is going to give us good direction to move forward.
And I'm gonna schedule it, on the calendar as an hour and a half, just to be
That would
We
be fine.
did go a little long, yeah.
just making sure that,
No, I wasn't
I'd
sure
say a
how.
lot of them say an hour and a half to two if we're getting into more detail of it. Unless you
I
guys
will
have
just
that.
walk out. Just, yeah.
Christie, I told Gary that I in 6 months I would check back with him to see how it was going. and
Right?
Maybe I could consider retiring too, but,
I know.
so how's it going?
He's having a great time.
I'm still doing some